Now, President Biden taunting Donald Trump's criminal trial.
Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
Trump then firing back, mocking the president's golf game.
I wonder whether or not he shows up because, you know, he also challenged me to golf. So I'm a very good golfer. He can't hit a ball 50 yards.
And just like that, you've got a presidential debate. It will happen in June and September. But did that actually turn out to be the second biggest story of the day for November? Why you might want to pay attention to the number 3.4. Come on in. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. All right, here we go, hanging out with us today. Scott Bolden, former D.C. Democratic Party chairman, NewsNation contributor. Ashley Davis, former George W. Bush White House official. Welcome back. Kevin O'Leary, you might know him simply as Mr. Wonderful. And Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House chief of staff, NewsNation contributor as well. Hello to you all.
When do we get something like Mr. Wonderful? When do we get that?
When do you get
Self-brand.
It takes a long time
to be called Mr. Wonderful?
Yeah, just call me.
How long have you had that name for?
It works because it's real advertising. It's all true. Truth in advertising.
How long have you had that name for?
About 15 years.
Okay, cool.
Who gave it to you?
He did. I think Barbara Cochran on the set of Shark Tank.
Okay.
Being facetious. She's so nasty.
So, Mr. Wonderful is here. Kelly Meyer is going to be joining us. Senator Pete Ricketts is going to be joining us. We're going to talk a little Aaron Rodgers. What's his political future? But, of course, let's start with the debates. I think that was the setup. Like, them sort of sniping back and forth. This happened in a matter of 4 hours, seemingly, today. Mick, what's the strategy?
Apparently, the Biden team decided they wanted to do this. The video that Biden put out was fantastic. If you wanted to sort of goad Donald Trump into accepting a challenge, this was the exact right way to do it. And I watched that video going, oh, he's absolutely going to accept this. Now, you would expect that he would anyway, because he said he would debate anytime, anywhere, under any circumstances. But I just thought it was, from a marketing standpoint, you can't do much better than this.
So, first of all, it's been negotiated behind the scenes for
a little while, yeah.
Yeah, between the two camps. So it's not something that just came out.
Came out publicly that way.
Exactly.
But it did happen quick. Like, they dropped this, the Biden team, at 8 a.m. on the dot. The New York Times clearly had an embargoed copy of this because they dropped their story at 8 a.m. and then, like, bang, 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 we got two debates.
So I want to make Scott's head spin before we move on for me for a second, because the conspiracy theory of the June 27th date is if Biden does really, really bad, they can still replace him before the
Oh, stop.
Oh, my goodness.
I love it when Republican consultants try to
Throw that grenade at it.
Democratic strategy. My Republican friends love talking about Democratic strategy and the conspiracy for what the Democrats are thinking and doing and the possibility. I'm not so sure you're the best qualified to do that,
for the Democrats.
But let me just say this about Biden. Biden had to do this debate at 2, maybe 3. They may still be wrong, but he had to do it, 1. But 2, the open question isn't whether there's going to be a third debate. The open question is whether there's going to be a real debate, or is this going to be another bully session on the part of Trump? Because Trump has demonstrated he cannot debate. He bullies his way through these sessions. He doesn't use statistics. He doesn't use arguments. He just kind of yells and screams and bullies his opponent. And that's not a debate, and that's not good for America.
Stipulations held in a TV studio, no in-person audience, microphone cuts off when speaker's time elapses. Mick said this was brilliant marketing. I wonder what you make of it.
I tell you what the country's really longing for, and maybe this is the first green shoot in this direction. We need policy. We need to see the differences between policy on immigration, border security. We want to understand taxes, foreign policy, energy security. I need to hear this information. Everything I'm getting is porn star wars. It just sucks the energy out of all of the cable and anything I look for information on, all network. It just sucks the air out of it. I'm tired of real estate wars, porn star wars. Let's get some policy wars going so I can know what to do when I'm investing capital.
Now, ordinarily, I would agree with that, except these are the two most well-known politicians probably in the world right now. You know where Donald Trump stands on the issues. You know where Joe Biden stands on the issues. I think folks are going to tune in to see how they
perform and conduct themselves. Is Biden capable of doing this? Is he too old for the job? Can Trump calm down, to Scott's point, for an hour and a half and be presidential? I think that's what this is about.
Kevin's right about what he wants to see. But Kevin, everybody on this panel is an intellectualized voter, if you will. We're intellectual voters. The average voter isn't paying attention. And in the end, what the factor that most people use to pull that lever, Democrat or Republican, is still the likability factor. Do I like this guy? Not so much what the policies are, because the average American doesn't really understand how policy.
You got inflation smoking hot right now.
Other than the inflation, of course, on those kitchen table issues.
Yeah.
But again, most people don't intellectualize their vote. They go with who they like, or they go by party lines.
So here's a policy question: what are you going to do about inflation? That'd be a fair policy question to ask.
I guarantee you it'll be in the mix, and it's important because if you don't have an answer for that, and you're only 4 months away at that point to where you pull the trigger, I think the independent vote is what we're talking about here, guys. They are going to make the decision who the president is, and right now they're unhappy because they have no information. They got porn.
What about RFK Jr.? Because this 15% threshold, that is the level to get in. Kelly Meyer is now reporting, let me dig this up, that RFK Jr. is saying that he will meet the debate criteria. Do you think this was set up to try to keep RFK Jr. out of it?
Well, RFK drives that, though. Can he qualify under the criteria? And two, can he get on the ballots? He's on 4 or 5 state ballots, but he's still promising to be on more.
Don't we deserve to hear from him? I mean, he's polling somewhere between 10 to 15.
Well, this is the problem with not using the Presidential Commission and it going away, is the two candidates, I think, negotiated for the benefit of themselves and not for another candidate.
I'd like to hear from him. Why not? But at this point, I think he takes away from both sides. So I'm not sure you can say he's a spoiler for either one.
Right.
I think there's a lot of independents that'll say, I'm going to vote for him instead of Biden, just as they would against Trump. So I don't think it's going to make a difference in the long run.
But Kevin, in the end, he's still a spoiler. There's no way, mathematically, practically, or literally, he can become president. So why is he there?
Potentially. I mean, it depends on who he pulls.
Tell me a scenario
I
where
happen
he
to
could
agree with
win.
Scott on this. He's on the ballot right now in 4 states. He might be on, I think, an additional 6 in the next couple of weeks. Let's say he stops at 15 or 20 states. He's never, ever going to be president. So why allow him into presidential debate?
So this all came down at 8 o'clock sharp here on the East Coast earlier this morning. New York Times story, President Biden tweet simultaneously, bring on the debates, let's do it. And I was sitting there at home this morning thinking, you know what I was looking forward to at 8:30 in the morning?
Bitcoin trading.
Not Bitcoin trading.
Oh, okay.
That was at 8:32. No, what I was looking forward to it after I took the kids to school.
The kitty.
Once the kids got out the door.
No, the kitty GameStop trading that you're doing.
Yeah, we could talk about GameStop later if you want. But there was the inflation print, right? And we were expecting it to come in somewhat hot. It didn't, depending on how you look at it. But Kevin, 3.4% inflation. And I wonder if the campaign tried to front run that number. But secondarily, I wonder if, the debates, we all expected that they were going to debate at some point in time. But inflation's not going away.
Yes.
And I wonder if what happened today, that number 3.4%, is actually the bigger story.
As far as I'm concerned, it guarantees you the Fed does nothing for the rest of the year. They're not going to be your friend if you're the incumbent. This is not great news for Biden. It really also is bad numbers in where you really care. Energy, protein on food, and housing. They all suck. There's no other way to do it because it's not going the right direction. Even if these numbers were flat, they'd be bad numbers because the Fed has a mandate. It's 2%. Not 2.5%, not 2.3%, it's 2%. So they are going to keep the hammer on rates right through the end of the year. This will not be Biden's friend. Inflation is the worst enemy of an incumbent in any administration.
So I want to show you a chart because I think this sums it up better than anything that I've seen. Check out the 2 lines here. Pop up the chart if we can. The blue line is inflation. The orange is President Biden's approval rating. So you'll notice as inflation has gone up, his approval rating moved in the opposite direction. But if you look at the end there, as inflation is seemingly stuck in this area, I don't know, 3.5%, 4%, wherever we are right now over the last 3 to 6 months, the president's approval rating has seemingly topped out. So is that, Kevin, for President Biden, that the end of the right of the chart there, is that the worry that if inflation, it's 3.4, let's say it goes to 3, whatever.
When we were sitting here 9 months ago, we were talking about 6 rate cuts by this time.
Right.
6 rate cuts. That would have helped Biden. That chart would look different. We got zero, nada. And we're not going to get one because inflation. And I'll tell you why. Inflation Reduction Act, that did not reduce inflation. That is why we have inflation.
Printing money and spending.
And, you know, Science and Chips and Science Act, too much money. We put $2 trillion too much into the economy. That's Biden's problem. That's his problem.
Okay, but you had to do something when he inherited a COVID economy. If you put that graph back up, let me tell you why this is good news for Biden. Can you put the graph back up?
I don't know how you're going to make this good news. I can't wait.
Let me tell you something.
I can't wait.
I'm a criminal defense attorney. I can pull that out of the hat. It was up at 9% about a year ago. It's been steadily declining. He's not getting credit for that. And it's at 3.4% right now. And I do think the number was slightly down from month to month. The reality is he doesn't get credit for that. And here's the other problem. What can Biden do? Someone on this panel tell me the top 3 things Biden can do to control inflation.
We couldn't have put all that money in the economy.
But he gets blamed for it, whether he's a Democrat or Republican.
I'll give you 2.
I asked for 3. Next.
Okay. maybe Kevin gets
Spend less.
one.
Okay, and I'll give you one you don't expect, but this is the one that means a lot to me.
Okay.
Deregulate. Because what Donald Trump
takes
proved,
too long
no,
to
it does not. We did it in about 24 months.
We got 6 months.
You could make it easier to bring goods and services to market. Inflation, too much money chasing too few goods. Let's make it easier for goods and services to get to market. That's what a deregulatory agenda does. Donald Trump proved that you can spend a lot of money because we spent a lot of money. There's no question.
One of the highest.
We ran deficits. There's no question. 0 inflation.
Okay, so why won't he do those 2 things in your opinion?
Why won't he do those?
Why won't he do those?
Because the Democrats cannot bring themselves to deregulate. It's outside their DNA. You can do it because you're a
That's right, but we've run out of time because even if you did that, even if you set that policy forward tomorrow morning, you got 4 months left. There's nothing you can do about inflation. You should have worried about this when you were printing money and throwing it out of a helicopter. And by the way, forgiving student loans, all inflationary. You got to stop giving away money.
And it's not just 4 months. It's actually, as our friend Chris Steigerwalt says, it's actually till July
1st, right.
The thought is that people make their decisions on a presidential candidate in July. Groceries are not going to go down. Rent's not going to go down, and car insurance is not going to go down.
Car insurance,
that graph,
22%.
we don't need to bring the graph up again. The graph is not prices, okay? That's the rate of inflation.
Yeah.
So it does not mean that prices are back down to where they were a year ago.
No, but it's trending downward or it's flattening out. That's got to be
the
good
rate
for the
of
Democrats.
increase.
It's not going up.
The rate of increase is trending down. It's still going up faster than it should.
But it's not going to be enough time.
1%.
It's not going to be enough time to impact the election.
I hear you say no rate cuts, and you actually said that on that show, on our show recently, and I think you're right.
And the next move may be up. That's what could happen here.
Do you think it's chances of going up or down?
In my opinion, there's a 50-50 chance of another 25 basis point increase. They're trying
before
to
the election or after?
I don't think they'll do anything before the election.
Okay.
I think right after the election in Q1, if they haven't stamped this thing down well close to 2%, look for 25 basis point increase.
But regardless of the statistics, it still comes down to what people are feeling.
Yeah.
How they're spending money on food and energy and gas and what have you. And that's what Biden's got to work on. He's got to say, I feel your pain, I'm doing everything in my power, and stop talking about these statistics because there's a huge emotional gap there with the American people. But we'll see.
You having fun, Mr. Wonderful? You having fun on this bet? It's fun, right? Good panel, good times. Kevin O'Leary joins us on the other side of the break. We're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers. Did you see what he had to say in RFK Jr.? And then the Veep stakes. Where do things stand right now for Donald Trump? I know the last time Kevin was on this show, we were talking about Kamala Harris and the Democrats. So where do things stand with the Republicans? What's Mick hearing? You're watching The Hill here on News Nation. Back in a few. All right, welcome back here to The Hill on News Nation. From New York Jets quarterback to vice presidential candidate, it would have been an unconventional and unbelievable career change for Aaron Rodgers, but he says he considered being RFK Jr.'s running mate. Rodgers joined the Tucker Carlson show.
That's why I was interested when Bobby came to me and said, would you think about being my running mate? And I said, are you serious? I said, I'm a football player. But I love this country, and I'd love to be a part of, bringing it back to what she used to be.
I'm a bleeping football player, he said to that. So here's what fascinates me about Aaron Rodgers and this. Name ID is probably 70, 80%. One of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, current quarterback of the New York Jets. got 9 figures in cash probably in the bank account, 40 years old, already being approached about vice presidential candidate. Are those all the ingredients in the pot there for a political career at some point down the line?
Well,
for
there's
him?
more. He killed me on Jeopardy.
Aaron Rodgers?
Yep. He has such fast reaction. When you're pushing a little button, I thought, I'm screwed. I didn't get a single question. I looked like a complete joke. I mean, I can't believe it, but...
Did he know the answers?
He knew the answer, but the point is that you
got to go first.
Well, when you got someone 6'5", 300 barreling down on you.
He slaughtered me. It's on YouTube. It's so embarrassing.
I don't see him as a vice presidential candidate or a presidential candidate right now.
What about politically?
But these are the folks who run for Senate. They run for Congress. They run for governor. Keep in mind, Kurt Schilling, baseball player for Boston, talked about running. We heavily tried to recruit John Smoltz from Atlanta to run for an open seat back in Georgia because we needed a pitcher for the Republican baseball team.
You like it.
I do like the idea. I just don't see it as VP. I think Tuberville ran for Senate as a coach. So this is not out of the bounds. Steve Largent, going back in the 1980s, was a politician. It wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah, but that's not the VP though. I mean, you can't take RFK Jr. seriously. And so, did we really take seriously?
Are you taking RFK seriously to begin with?
No, I'm not taking him seriously. But then I really don't care about who his running mate is or why, if he plays football or not. He's got as many supporters as non-supporters. Rodgers does, especially in Chicago, the way he beats up on the Bears when he was with Green Bay.
Where are you? So the last time Kevin was on the show, we talked about vice presidential candidates, and you two had some back and forth. I wonder where you are right now on mixed picks with Donald Trump laid out for us.
Well, I'm still where I was until Ashley started yelling at me during the break. And by the way, your mother told you to be nicer to me. She was really mean to me during the break. And I have Linda McMahon on the list. And again, I recognize the fact I'm the only person with that name, but here's why I've got Linda amongst my big four. She fits part of the description, which is who can Donald Trump pick, okay, who sort of checks a box. She's a woman, she's an African-American, something like that. She's business, he likes that, and she's not going to run for president. She's not going to immediately be seen. The next race, regardless of whether or not Trump or Biden wins, the 2028 race starts the next day. Yeah. And does Donald Trump want somebody sitting across the parking lot for him over in the EOB or down the hallway in the West Wing thinking, okay, it's time for me to start running for president?
I got a problem with your picks.
Yeah.
Where's Doug Burgum?
Yes, I was just going to say that.
Doug the Muppet? No.
Let me do a shout out for Doug Burgum because I met him a couple of years ago. If he becomes the pick, if I hear that in the next couple of weeks or whatever's going to happen, I'm going long energy and long mid-cap domestic companies. And this will be the first VP in decades with meat on the bone.
And here's why I'm short. Here's why I'm short Doug Burgum. And I know Donald Trump a little bit. He doesn't look the part. He's not from central casting. If I've heard that word one time,
the guy gets stuff done. Why can't we have a VP that does something?
What does he bring to the table that Donald Trump doesn't have already?
Mick, why would you ever think that he looks any different than Pence?
No, Pence. But I don't think
no, but I mean, they're both.
I don't think anything
to my
alike.
colleagues, this is about electability.
Pence.
And that's why central casting is so important. It's interesting. The politics of governing, which is what Kevin's talking about, and the politics of winning a campaign are very, very different. You're right. He's probably most qualified, and he'd get a lot done as VP.
Look what he did in North Dakota.
I know, but the politics of winning a campaign have nothing to do with his qualifications.
Why can't you say I can get stuff done? I'll fix it like North Dakota, richest per capita in the country now. Great policy. You know, Trump could say, go fix immigration.
Go against the board.
He would be, but he would
That's not going to get him elected.
But who's going to get him elected? Who is going to get?
Well, he's got to bring
Linda
somebody to help him
McMahon,
get
Tim
elected.
Scott.
Short list.
And why don't you have Kristi Noem on there?
Let me ask you something.
Might help him get elected.
In your world, do people want Doug Burgum as the selection for the reasons you laid out, or that is simply just a trade that you potentially see for the dynamics?
What I think's happened to the country in the last 3.5 years is they want politicians that get stuff done. Yeah. That's what I believe. And I think the way you market Burgum is quiet, effective, ex-entrepreneur. Look at his track record in a state no one looked at till 2 years ago. This guy's killing it. Why not make him a vice president that actually works?
He did that as a presidential candidate and came in 16th out of 15 candidates.
Exactly.
He doesn't add anything.
So did Kamala. Wasn't she the first one that dropped out?
She was the first one to drop out, absolutely.
Yeah.
But listen, here's the bottom line.
But she brought something different to the campaign.
If I was looking for a CEO of my company, I'd look at Doug, right?
Bingo.
I'm looking for a VP that's going to bring part of the country in votes and winning, because he can't govern the way you want him to govern unless he wins. And that ticket's not going to be as strong with Doug Berman as it is with someone else.
Tim Scott.
What's Tim Scott? Okay, I just want to say, what's
Ben
Tim
Carson? Why is Ben Carson on that list, by the way?
Ben Carson is a very...
What is the biggest business in America? It's America. Why can't we have a CEO that was a killer in the entrepreneurial space? Remember, this guy sold his company to Microsoft. The second largest campus is in Fargo. Nobody even knows that. I want an entrepreneur as VP.
Nobody's going to disagree with you.
No, I need to say something.
But he's got to get elected in order to support what your theory is.
Okay, let's go back. Who would scare you the most?
On VP?
Yeah. Oh, good question.
Thanks. Maybe I should take over Blake's job.
A woman from suburbia that can bring the woman vote to Donald Trump. It may be Linda, it may be someone else, because that's where his greatest exposure is. And remember, he can't grow, at least theoretically, between 40 and 45%. If he gets 45%, he wins, right? Who is that? Nikki. Nikki wants to be president. He'll never pick Nikki.
All right,
I'm saying who scares you the most.
She doesn't scare me. She'll scare me in 4 years or 8 years.
Don't you have some inside story about Nikki?
She's a Nikki
And
girl.
another thing.
All right. Before Kevin heads out here, I want to turn the attention back to New York City. The mayor there, Eric Adams, has a possible solution to lifeguard shortages in the Big Apple.
How do we have a large body of people that are in our city and country that are excellent swimmers, and at the same time we need lifeguards? And the only obstacle is that we won't give them the right to work to become a lifeguard. That just doesn't make sense.
I don't know how those two ladies sitting on either side of him weren't cringing when that was coming out of his mouth.
What'd you make of the mayor of the Big Apple there?
I don't think New York is well managed, period. I think that state has got some serious problems. I think, and I mean no disrespect, if I were living in New York paying taxes, and thank goodness I am not, I would want a spatula from heaven to scrape that whole thing clean and start over. I don't care if you're Democrat or Republican. You need some executional skills. That city is a mess. That state is a mess, and it needs fixing. And I'm sorry, I'm not the only one that feels that way.
What about, you've got labor shortages. What about the idea of, you know what, there's migrants there. We have labor shortages. You were talking about lifeguards, but you've got food services, hospitality, and on down the line. Why?
I guess if I were a migrant, I'd be insulted saying I'm a good swimmer. What is that?
That's the point. It was a really...
Wait a minute now. He gave two other examples in line with them being excellent swimmers. If they're excellent swimmers, why not give them a work permit and let them be lifeguards? There's a shortage. If it was healthcare or restaurant, do the same. He's got to do something with these migrants that the Republican governors have sent north and have
Democrat administration has let in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
okay. Call what you want, but he's got to be...
You two have to run, so I want to give you the last word here.
No, I'm just saying, Scott, he said they're excellent swimmers because they came here illegally through the water, and some of them swam here.
Well, he didn't say all that.
That's what
You're presuming.
You've got to be kidding.
Last
You're
word.
presuming that. He didn't say that.
Were you presuming that?
We all, yes.
Wrongfully?
But I will defend him in this. When you talk for a living, as many of us do, okay, you're going to say stupid things from time to time.
That's the answer.
You just do, yes. I bet he wishes he had that one back, and you're right. But I think the better issue is this, is that these folks are going to be here. There's no likelihood of them leaving anytime soon. Do we want them to work or not? I happen to agree with the mayor. Let them work.
Kevin O'Leary, Ashley Davis. Fun time.
It should be Ashley Davis.
Kevin O'Leary.
I guess A goes first.
Mr. Wonderful, great to have you in. As always, nice to see you.
Thank you.
We'll
really
talk to you again soon. Other side of the break, still much more ahead here on the Hill. Kelly Meyer is joining us. So too is Senator Pete Ricketts. What happened in his state last night? We'll get to it. Hot Mic with Mick coming up in about 15 minutes. You're watching the Hill here on News Nation. 30 to go. Stay with us. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. House Republicans are putting the Israel-Hamas war front and center this week. Tomorrow, they will bring a resolution to the floor to force the White House to continue weapons transfers to Israel. Now, it comes after President Biden threatened to withhold weapons if Israel goes forward with an invasion, a large-scale invasion, in Gaza, in the town of Rafah. The White House is threatening to veto that measure.
We said that we would veto that bill. The administration strongly opposes this attempt to constrain the president's ability to deploy U.S. security assistance consistent with U.S. foreign policy and national security objectives.
Here's how the House Speaker Mike Johnson reacted, saying, quote, the president and his administration need to reverse course immediately to stand with Israel and against the terrorism and atrocities of Iran and its proxies. Kelly Meyer.
Hello.
Hello.
Miss Wonderful.
Miss Wonderful.
Miss Wonderful.
Thank you, guys.
NewsNation Washington correspondent, going to be hanging out with us. Yeah, good to have you in for the next half hour or so. The White House and this vote tomorrow. This is a tough one for Democrats.
Yeah, there's a lot with this, because they're really going to try to get Democrats on the record here. So we know, we've heard from our sources that the White House, the NSC, they're making calls to Congress to try to shore up support with Democrats. They're going to have a tough vote here to vote against supporting more aid for Israel. But the White House is saying, don't do this, because it's interesting the timing of this, because they also came out and announced another $1 billion shipment of weapons last night. What they're saying is our support is still ironclad. We just paused that one shipment, and we are continuing with our weapon shipment. So it's, kind of balanced.
There's kind of like a technicality here, right? Because part of their argument, Mick, is don't handcuff the president of the United States, which I think you could probably understand as a former chief of staff. But on the other side of it, you've got Republicans doing this because they want to make the point that they believe the president is not firmly standing behind Israel.
There's a bunch of different moving pieces, and it's not falling neatly into partisan politics right now, because it sounds like there might be as many as a dozen Democrats. I heard the number might be bigger 16. Than that. Or it could have been as high as 40 as a couple days ago, but they've been sort of peeling them back, that Democrats who would vote for this. Here's the dynamic, okay? The House just voted overwhelmingly to send this money in the first place, and now the White House comes in and says no. Now, they can't do that forever, otherwise it's an impoundment, which is against the law. So the White House knows that. They do have some ability to limit the flow of funds when it comes to foreign policy, but it's not absolute. So if they don't spend this money by September, they might be breaking the law anyway, and they know that. So they can hold the money, but they can't hold it forever. The House knows that. This is going to be a political vote, there's no question, but it may be a political vote that hurts the White House.
Senator Pete Ricketts is with us. Stand by just for 1 second, Senator, but from the Democratic perspective, this is a tough one, tricky one.
I don't think it's that tough. When you send $1 billion to them, and before that you argued for 6 months, 9 months for this support, and it was the Republicans that held it up, it's a talking point. You want to try to get them on the record, but messaging bill. But other than that, anybody that thinks Biden's not supportive of Israel, he just doesn't appreciate how they're fighting the war. It borders on the nonsensical.
And Schumer's already said he's not going to give this a vote in the Senate regardless.
Right. So this doesn't see the light of day in the Senate. All right, come on in, Senator Pete Ricketts from the state of Nebraska, Republican. I believe maybe the first time here on the Hill. Senator Ricketts, thanks for being with us. Appreciate the time. So you've been listening in on some of this. This is going to be taken up in the House, as you know, tomorrow, but not going to probably see the light of day in Senate. Why, sir, is this a good use of time for Republicans up on the Hill?
Well, I think it's absolutely important to point out that when President Biden says ironclad, he doesn't really mean it. I mean, for crying out loud, British Foreign Minister David Cameron understands that withholding weapons from Israel helps Hamas. And that's exactly what the president's doing. Every time he makes any sort of criticism of what's going on here and holds up these weapons, Hamas feels like their hand is strengthened. And they are not likely to negotiate. They're not going to give things back. This is a way to make the point that the president really needs to mean what he says, because it's not only impacting Israel, but it's impacting allies around the world that are going to wonder, well, can I rely on America in the future if one of America's closest allies, Israel, can't rely on America?
So what would you say to the House Speaker? I know the other chamber, but this is one of the top Democrats here in Washington, Hakeem Jeffries. He said the following. I'll get your reaction on the other side.
It's not a serious effort to protect America's national security or strengthen the relationship between the United States and Israel.
The top Democrat in the House talking to our Joe Khalil. How would you respond?
I just go back to President Biden said he's got an ironclad relationship with Israel. It's not so ironclad. He's backing away from it. And frankly, he's doing it all for political reasons, because he's afraid of his pro-Hamas wing of his Democrat Party. He's worried about this presidential race in Michigan. I mean, this is totally politics on the president's side. We need to stand with Israel 100%. Hamas started this war. They broke the ceasefire. They committed atrocities. Every death in Gaza today and up from October 7th is because of what Hamas did. They're responsible. We need to arm Israel with everything that they need to win. And frankly, when we passed the supplemental to give them the aid, it wasn't with the restrictions that the president could pick and choose what he wanted to do. So he's really also defying the intent of Congress here as well.
All right, let me ask you about your state real quick, Senator. The trade war might be back on with China, and you know what happened last go around. How worried are you as an agriculture state that if there's a tit for tat between the U.S. and China, that this could hurt ag communities all across your state?
The fact of the matter is, China's a terrible trade partner. They haven't lived up to their agreements that they had with us in the past. And frankly, when President Trump put the tariffs on before and China reacted by putting tariffs on our agricultural products, while our producers weren't happy about it, let me tell you, they understood the need to do what it takes to get China to behave in the world according to world norms and being a fair trading partner. So certainly there's short-term pain here, but our agricultural producers understand that we've got to take a tough stance with China, that they're a terrible trade partner, and the only way you're going to get any response from them is if you act tough with them.
Let me ask you before I let you go, sir, and I know you got to run, but last night in your state, there was a primary there in Nebraska. Nikki Haley hasn't been campaigning for months. And she picked up in the neighborhood of 20%, roughly 1 out of every 5 votes in your state from Republicans. What are you hearing, Senator, from voters in your state who are voting for Nikki Haley? And how big of a warning do you think this is potentially for Donald Trump?
When you look at any election, there's always going to be somebody who votes against the front runner, the incumbent, whatever it is. You're going to get that protest vote. I don't think there's anything big to read into this. President Trump is very popular in Nebraska. The real challenge is going to be if the president can put together a campaign to win our 2nd congressional district, because as you know, we split up our electoral college votes.
Yep.
It's us and Maine that does that, the only 2 states.
Did the state legislature get it wrong? There was a push to make it, as you know, the congressional districts are split up, and it's not all or nothing. Did they get it wrong in your state?
We have a filibuster rule in our legislature, so it's very tough to break. When I was governor, we came with 1 vote of getting Nebraska back to winner-take-all. There's still short votes in this legislature to be able to do it. So we would like to change it back to what the rest of the country does, which is winner-take-all. We're disenfranchising our rural voters. We should play by the same rule that 48 other states play by.
All right, we'll leave it there. Senator Pete Ricketts from the state of Nebraska. Thank you, sir, and we hope you come on back here on the Hill.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yep. All right. By the way, did you see this? King Charles's first portrait since becoming monarch was unveiled earlier this week across the pond. The portrait Scott. The portrait depicts the king.
We knew you couldn't get through this one with a straight
I couldn't even make it through 10 seconds. That's the portrait. Forget the script. What do you see there? King Charles.
A floating head? I'm not sure what that is. That's just...
But it says here that Camilla said, yes, you've got him after seeing the result of that photo.
Yeah, so here's the video of him pulling the... What is that thing?
What's with the red all around?
So the red, here's the deal. The red goes, this was a portrait that was drawn as commemorating part of his service in the Royal Military. I can't remember what it was. The something Guards. And their color is apparently that color. He's wearing that uniform. And the artist decided to take the color from the uniform and make it the entire background of the entire...
So he looks like Man on Fire. I won't say what happens when he passes away. His face is right, yes. I like abstract art. This is kind of abstract art and what have you, but I don't know.
Abstract art.
So, Scott, at the risk of, provoking my Democrat friend, is it better or worse than the official portraits of Barack and Michelle Obama?
Oh, it's much worse than them. Their portraits are outstanding. Just outstanding.
All right.
Protect the mundo.
Coming up here on the Hill, other side of the break, Hot Mic with Mick. Speaking of the Obamas, we're going to talk about Michelle Obama. She's back in the news.
Do we have her portrait coming up?
We can show the portrait, I guess, if you want. But what to make of some comments made recently about Michelle Obama? Hot Mic with Mick, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill.
A NewsNation exclusive. What happened at the pageant? Miss Teen USA runner-up Stephanie Skinner talks to Dan about her shocking refusal to accept the crown, how her decision impacts the pageant world. Plus, conservative author Ann Coulter joins Dan live tomorrow starting at 9 Eastern, only on NewsNation.
He's thinking, all right, Mick, Democrats, Republicans have talked about a possible Michelle Obama candidacy for years, right? It's a dream for some Democrats, I think. Now Stephen A. Smith is adding his 2 cents, saying the former First Lady would be hands down be the next president if she decided to run. All right, so if you decide to run, obviously there's a primary and then there's a general, right? So let's go one by one. Hands down wins a Democratic primary.
Sure. I mean,
100%?
Absolutely.
What about general?
She's never going to run. I don't know why Stephen A. Smith made news on this, and all the more reason maybe not to watch sports shows to get your political.
So he's a sports commentator on ESPN.
I mean, I could walk down the street and somebody can say Michelle Obama might be a good president.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's great. Thank you for your 2 cents. But ask the Democrats here, as I've done several times, if they think she's ever going to run for office. The answer is absolutely, positively not. Could she beat Donald Trump? I think that she could. Is there a long list of Republicans who could beat Joe Biden? Yes, there is. But that's not what you've got. You've got Trump and you've got Biden. If you wanted something else, there was a process that Michelle chose not to engage in, and I respect that.
I mean, Stephen A. Smith has branched off into this political commentary in the last maybe 6 months, a year, maybe longer. He does sports, and now he's commenting on the presidential race and stuff. And I really like him in the sports space.
I think the same about Keith Olbermann. Remember him from Sports Center? Yeah,
listen, you can have opinions all you want, but they ought to be informed and a little research.
When you're Democratic events, circles, whatever, how often do you hear that? People say, well, if Michelle, if she were to do it.
Not often at all, because of what Mick said. It's just a non-starter. And until she sends something up, smoke signal up, it's not really subject to a whole lot of discussion.
All right. Over to Maryland, Nebraska, West Virginia. They held primaries last night, and despite ending her campaign on Super Tuesday, what was that, 2 months ago, give or take, somewhere around there, Nikki Haley continues to win a sizable portion of the primary vote. These 2 primaries, Mick, 2 of them, were closed, meaning only Republicans could vote. And in the county that includes Omaha, in Nebraska, the suburbs there, Haley picked up 23%. What's going on there? We just heard Pete Ricketts say, there's a protest vote anytime there's sort of an election, but what's going on here?
I thought a really good interview with Senator Ricketts, former governor of that state, and clearly someone who understands how this business works. And what he said was, and he's right, there's always going to be a protest vote. There is. The question is this: does that protest vote come back home in November? Democrats are dealing with the same thing. The numbers are a little bit different, but you saw big protest votes against Joe Biden
in Michigan. The uncommitteds in Michigan.
Exactly.
All that.
This is going to happen in a primary, especially when it's a free vote. Okay, it doesn't count now. We all know that Donald Trump is going to win the primary. We know that Joe Biden is going to win the primary. The question is, where do those folks go in November? They don't go to the other side, by the way. They don't switch. The question is, do they stay home and not vote for president, or do they come home and vote for their party? That's where this election is going to be won or lost. Usually you fight over people in the middle. Right. This time, probably in my first time in my adult lifetime, you're fighting to make sure your base comes back.
What are you hearing?
I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, well, there's a few things there. I mean, the suburbs you mentioned, that's where former President Trump is having trouble with women in the suburbs. And then you also have, as you were saying, will this happen in November? It could come down to be a factor if you have the protest vote with people going for Nikki Haley. Then you have the protest vote for Biden. Folks say that they don't want to go to the polls because of what's happening in Gaza. Then you have RFK Jr., who may come in and be another wild card. So I think people need to also take seriously that this could really have an impact in November.
All right. Talk to me about your op-ed, new op-ed in The Hill. The headline: Congress must break its bipartisan addiction to spending. What do you mean there?
Yeah, there's a lot of conversation over the course of the last 18 months about a bipartisan commission to do something about the debt, which is now $35,000 billion. I don't
35 trillion.
I don't use trillion.
That's a better way to describe it.
It makes it sound smaller, right?
Say that number again.
$35,000 billion.
Wow. Okay.
Huge number, and it's not going to happen. And in large part, it's not going to happen because both camps are staying in their camp. The Democrats are refusing to support it because they say they won't even talk about things unless Social Security is off the table. I think Medicare as well. Many Republicans are saying they won't support it unless tax increases are off the table. This is how you get $35,000 billion in debt in the first place, which is no one wants to compromise on how to reduce spending, so we're not going to reduce spending.
And the heart attack is in a decade when all of a sudden your Social Security, you're getting 80 cents on the dollar. Your Medicare Part A, it's paying out 75 cents on the dollar or whatever.
It's 8 years. It's a 22% across the board cut 8 years from now.
So none of this gets fixed until a decade from now.
Washington is much better at doing nothing than it is at doing something, and things in Washington tend to only get fixed after they are broken. You put that together, it's a very dangerous combination.
Do you pass by that bus stop that it says the debt on like the scrolling thing and it changes? It's right by the mall, and I pass it almost every day, and I think about it, I was like, that's so DC.
You get the wildest
Congressman
things.
Thomas Massey has one on his. He made one that goes on his
like
his
a
lapel.
clock.
Yes, it ties into the atomic clock.
It's electric.
It's absolutely. It's Wi-Fi. It's up to
like
the
a battery.
That's kind of wild. It is remarkable living here in Washington in the general area. Like you'll be watching TV and then call your senator over this like random thing that pops up on your screen.
You know, everybody holding signs outside the metro, and I'm like, oh, I love it.
Voters don't care about the debt yet, and until they do, this town is not going to change.
All right, other side of the break, host of On Balance, Leland Vittert, joins us on the other side. You're watching The Hill here on News Nation. Stay with us. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye as the fight for Title IX continues to heat up. 4 more Republican-led states are now suing the Biden administration over Title IX rules for transgender students. Kansas, Utah, Wyoming, and Alaska now joining a coalition of more than 20 Republican attorneys general filing similar lawsuits earlier this month. Now, the Department of Education's new federal rules officially add gender identity to the list of protections from sex-based discrimination for the very first time. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. Hello.
Present and accounted for.
Present and accounted for. I'm surprised it's only 20 and not all Republican-led states.
And you have
goes?
some that have Republican attorney generals or Democratic attorney generals, Republican governors, on and on and on. You're right, surprising. I think this goes to the point that Republicans feel as though that they have defined the field of battle on the transgender issue, which is they have defined it as parents of girls do not want boys playing on their girls' sports teams, and fathers of daughters do not want boys in the locker rooms. That's a winning message politically, and it's one that is at about 80% when it comes to polling. That's Republicans' version of abortion for Democrats.
I just walked into the green room and saw Senator Lindsey Graham.
Lindsey Graham is here. I don't know if you heard that there's going to be some presidential debates.
2 of them, I heard. Not one, but 2.
But 2.
That was
but
news
not
today.
3.
But not 3.
Not 3. So we're going to be talking to Lindsey Graham about that, and also we'll get his thoughts. A story that I know you've been following a lot and is going to become the biggest story in the world in about 2 weeks, which is Ukraine. So we'll be talking about that.
All right, that does it for us here on The Hill. We'll catch you back tomorrow. Thank you, sir. Go get him.
See ya.